Hi guys, Adam McCubbin here. Super excited to share with you this episode today. I hope you get out as much information as I did doing this interview. A lot of preparation, effort, and work goes into each episode, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to this episode. Plus, if you want to leave a comment below or ask any questions, I'd be more than happy to get back to you. Just a quick announcement, this show is now brought to you by MYPROTEIN. MyProtein is an online company that sells supplements, training apparel, and equipment. It's a company that I've used for several years and highly recommend their products. I'll put a link to the website below, plus a 25% discount code if you'd like to purchase products from there. And without further ado, here's the episode. So welcome Jesse Akister back to the podcast. The very first guest we've had on twice.
Yeah.
And I obviously need to apologize from last time not having our audio 100% correct. I got these new mics, had it plugged into the computer. Shit just didn't work. But in the end, we had a backup mic and yours ended up working.
And we learn from all the mistakes.
Exactly.
We've got to take imperfect action.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah. And so just give us a little bit of a snapshot of what's happened in the last 6 months. And also just perhaps before you do that, for people who might have missed that first episode, just who is Jesse Akister? What have you been doing and how did you get into powerlifting?
Okay. So I'm Jesse Akister. I'm Australian. I lived in the UAE for a little over 11 years. I originally came out as cabin crew. I worked for Emirates and then I went into private flying and then worked for a school that taught protocol and business etiquette. And through that time, found CrossFit, competed in CrossFit, made the change to powerlifting because I was better at that and there were less things to be good at. And obviously, very passionate about education and growing people, so it was a natural fit to get into coaching. So when I left Dubai, it was to kind of pursue that passion and have some opportunities to be around amazing people and learn more and put myself out of my comfort zone and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a powerlifter and a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you just tell us that transition from last time when you told us about how you were cabin crew and then you made the jump from cabin crew to CrossFit, group fitness, then CrossFit, then powerlifting?
Yeah, so briefly, because we went into it in a lot of detail in the last episode.
Yeah, but, you don't have to go in full detail.
I was flying. I had not done any kind of training in years. I was very deconditioned. I was overweight. And I was on a flight and I put my back out. And I spent the week on pain meds, just trying to survive the trip. When I got back, I went to the osteopath and they sort of realigned me and gave me some medication and said, it's only going to get better if you get fit. Yeah. So it's amazing how few doctors say things like that. So I'm like really grateful that I had a great doctor. And so I started doing like the Les Mills group exercise classes. I love that community environment. And then I started circuit classes, wanted to challenge myself further, signed up to do a Tough Mudder. I had 6 months to get ready to do that. I recruited some friends. I signed up and told them that they were coming and they didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so that was when I found CrossFit. Some friends had told me about it. They had tried it in Australia and had great things to say. And so I decided to give it a go and I went and did my first class. And it was your body weight in pounds times that many reps of a deadlift. and I had to scale it in half, and I did 60 reps, and for like a week I couldn't walk. But I was like addicted from that moment. I was like, this thing that like challenges me and like pushes me so hard, and there's so many things that I need to get better at. Plus there were people that was loads stronger than me and so much more capable, and I had never had that experience. Normally you go to a normal gym and like I had been one of the most capable people in the classes.
And you had that sort of competitive nature. I think in the last podcast you said that you walked in and they looked at you and thought, this girl's not going to be able to do it, and you're like, I'm going to do this.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to prove people wrong, and I think it's also it's my own internal dialogue. I think there's that voice in your head that says like, oh, you're not good enough and all of that. And for a long time I think that was the motivator as well, to prove to myself that I could do it. And
where do you think you actually got that sort of competitive spirit for yourself? That it's one thing to walk into a gym and being around people who are super experienced and you say, oh, I'm going to get on their level. Like, not everyone has that.
That's true.
Where a lot of people sort of need that. And I think a lot of the people that I've worked with, that you try and tap into that. Where do you think you get it? But also, like, how would you advise if you're working with a client? I know you do quite a bit of coaching. Is there any sort of tricks that you would use? But maybe just talk about yourself first.
So I think from a personal standpoint, when I was growing up, my parents had me in sports and were very supportive. Like, I did gymnastics when I was very young, and and I used to compete, and they were very supportive of me competing. And when I would do well, of course, that was great. And it was the same. I did like little athletics, and we played netball and all of those things, and all of those experiences, I was always encouraged to be competitive and to try and do my best. I think you learn a lot from being in sports as a child about like winning and losing and overcoming adversity and all of those things. And so even though I hadn't done any sort of training in years and hadn't really been competitive in anything, I think that underlying probably like those things that I'd done as a child had probably set me up for, once I was in the right environment again, it just brought out those things. I think from a coaching perspective, especially if someone's never trained before or never been in competitive situations before, it's about giving them wins. So they start to see that they're capable. And then once someone has that sort of self-belief that they can do things that they didn't think were possible, that's when you can start challenging them and maybe convince them to try a competition. Or I think most people, the reason they don't do it is because they believe they can't. So if you can give someone enough self-belief by those small wins, then when they have that the first sort of like I couldn't do a push-up, and then suddenly they can do a push-up, then they can do something that was impossible. It's interesting that you say, or that you did gymnastics as a kid. In the recent sort of 2 strength coaches that I interviewed, some guys who worked at sort of the elite level in tennis coaching, but also Olympic athletes in luge as well. And they said, I remember one of the questions I asked them was, if you were, what advice would you give to parents to set your kids up to give them the best abilities for their sports prowess later? And they both said, and I've heard other people talk about it before, it's like gymnastics is like without a doubt, gives you that sort of proprioception, gives you the body awareness, and obviously your testament, you're at a sort of high level with your powerlifting and also obviously CrossFit as well. I 100% agree. And like, I didn't take gymnastics as far as I could have. My father was in the military, so we moved quite often. So it was hard for me to stay like in a club and follow through. So we kind of, after we moved, then I would just join a sport at the next place that we were at. So I think almost because of the way that we traveled and things when I grew up, I never got to follow through to probably what was my potential when I was younger. But it was quite obvious to me, well, like when I started CrossFit, that things that I had done as a child meant that like it wasn't terrifying for me to get upside down. My body had done that before. So a lot of the things that I had done, even though it had been like 20 years before, it had given me that base that my body had been in those spaces before and had moved that way. And it's very hard to gain that as an adult when you... Yeah,
it's quite interesting. And so transition from, I know we've spoken about it before, but just transition from CrossFit to powerlifting. Just briefly sort of touch on that. So,
as we all know, CrossFit is like such a broad sport. It's literally like it can be anything. But within the sort of standard movements of CrossFit, there's like a massive number of things to be good at. So I went to regionals on a team in 2016, and that had been sort of my big goal in training for a few years. And then the reality of the sport is that if you want to be really good at any sport, it's going to take a huge amount of commitment and sacrifice and, then also having an amazing team around you and all of those things. But with me being in my early 30s and the amount of time that I have free and all of those things, the reality is that as competitive as I'd like to be, I know that I can't commit what I need to be that competitive in CrossFit. Like I've got a number of friends who are games athletes and I know what they go through to get there. And after doing one sort of season in 2016, like that was more than enough for me to have that experience, and it was great. I will never say that I won't do it again. I may consider it as a master's athlete because that's not that far off. But powerlifting was like be good at three things. And I was always naturally better at the heavy weights.
So you identified when you were doing CrossFit that you were reasonably strong for...
I looked at like the top CrossFit athletes and I looked at all their like benchmark times for workouts and like heavy lifts, and my lifts were always at the top end, like with the top games athletes. But my like gymnastics, conditioning and those things were like needed to really come up. And my Olympic lifting is not as strong as my powerlifting. Like I'm not so great overhead. Like I'm not like absolutely abysmal, but it's...
Yeah, well you can't be good at everything, so...
So, it was just very natural for me to choose that. Like that was what was the easiest thing for me.
Okay. And so since we last caught up, you've moved back to Australia to considerably colder climate. What have you been doing in Australia? I've seen on your Instagram you've been doing a fair bit of travel up the East Coast.
Yeah, I've been doing lots of travel. So I got into Australia in the end of January, and my family, my dad is in Canberra. So when I'd been home the year before, I had been to this little powerlifting gym like 10 minutes from my dad's house, and it turns out that some of the best lifters in Australia are in that gym. So I met Liz Craven and Shay and Claire and Megan, and they're all incredible lifters. And I remember being in there thinking, like, how can I make the opportunity for me to, like, spend a good amount of time training here with these guys and, like, see what happens from that.
Yeah.
And so that was, like, January the year before, and it had been something that had been playing on my mind for a while. But realistically, I knew if I kept my life here, then like it was going to cost me money to do all of that. So I went, well, I've got to go back to Australia. I've got to do the live with my parents so I can have that opportunity to train, fully expose myself to these opportunities, and then just see what happens.
Yeah.
So I spent some time, I mentioned in the last podcast that I've been doing a lot of work with Julian Pinot and StrongFit. So they were in Australia for about almost 6 weeks, I think. So practically the week after I arrived, I went and spent a week in Sydney with them, redoing the seminar and the coaches week and going through how their systems and things have been evolving.
So you'd be a lecturer for them, or is that?
No, I was just observing all of the seminars and things again. And then I went down to Melbourne, picked up my dog.
Yeah.
And while I was down there, connected with some more powerlifters that are some of the best guys in Australia. So got to lift with them and get some more tips and talk about, how we do stuff.
How to lift heavier weights.
Yeah, and how to lift heavier weights more perfectly. And then I got back to Canberra, and then the Stronger Fit guys were in Canberra. So we had a few weeks where I was training with the Strong Fit guys and training with all the powerlifters, and all of this was prep. I was prepping for a comp as well. And Chad Wesley Smith and Marissa Inder came out to Canberra as well. So I got to spend a few days with them, doing more lifting and geeking out about powerlifting. So I really just spent those few months going to meet as many people as I could in gyms. Yeah.
And was that was it worthwhile for you in terms of your knowledge and your lifts as well? Have they stayed the same? Are you?
Yeah.
Because obviously relocating countries is quite stressful.
Yeah. So when I left, I hadn't competed in a year. I'd taken some time off and taken an off season. And then I started working with Bryce Lewis from the US. His company, The Strength Athlete, do online powerlifting coaching for drug-free athletes. And he was coaching me through my prep. So he does all my programming, and then we check in each week and then adapt as we go. But so I think I ended up doing about a 16-week prep for the comp I did at the end of March.
Yeah.
So I ended up PRing my squat, bench, and total. Doing 150 kilo squat, a 90 kilo bench, and a 170 deadlift. And so that's my totals now 410. And I now have a 400 plus Wilks.
Yeah.
So, yay.
Yeah. So you'd be with your, sorry, what was your your bench press? The bench press was
90.
90. Because that's up there in terms of the limited sort of exposure I've had to powerlifting. That's quite strong. Is that your strongest lift out of comparing to other women in your weight class?
They're all relatively kind of, I guess, it's hard to say, because there are outliers in everything,
Yeah.
Because the world record is like over 120 kilos. But most of the women would be anywhere between 90 and 110 for the top in the world. Of course, that's not but it's to have a 400 Wilks is considered very good. So. Yeah.
Because I saw the week before last, I saw Annika from, I think she's from Sweden.
Yeah.
She benched 100, and it looked like they had still had quite a bit left in the tank.
Yeah.
And it's just impressive because I've worked with clients for a long time, and I've never got a woman close to getting that. Obviously, powerlifting technique's a bit different, but yeah,
it's one of the things I've noticed coaching women, it's not only does it takes a really long time to get to that because the amount of muscle mass you need. So a lot of the girls who are very strong do come from bodybuilding or gymnastics and other things, and because they built muscle mass over years, and then they go to powerlifting. But like, you know, it's a long process to get a good bench for a female.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge because just on the weekend gone, my wife competed in her first powerlifting comp, and it was funny just from the time that we'd spent together. A lot of the stuff you said about the powerlifting community here in Dubai is very positive. Everyone's like cheering for everyone else, and you can kind of see how people would just enjoy the sport here.
Yeah.
How does it compare to Australia? Is it sort of the same across the world in terms of that sort of community vibe? Everyone's sort of there cheering, or does it get a bit catty? And
I've only had good experiences. Like obviously I can't speak for anyone else, but everywhere I've traveled in the world, you're welcomed as part of the community. And I used to find the same thing in CrossFit, but powerlifting is a little more niche, I guess. So being able to walk into a gym and you speak the same language. So you may have nothing else in common, but you love lifting. So that is something that really brings people together. And like, to me, it's such a, like, seeing Olivia compete now after like getting motivated to try.
Yeah, well, and I must say, she listened to the podcast, and you were the thought process went off in her mind. She's like, hang on, maybe this is what I want to do. Yeah,
and to me, that's such a powerful thing to me, because to see myself giving someone that idea that, oh, maybe they could do that too.
Yeah.
Because it's not until you see that someone else has tried it that then you go, oh, okay, well, it's not impossible. And it's, you know, they talk about having like representation in sports and in different industries and stuff. And I think, I don't know if you follow like Chucky Welsh, she's American Olympic weightlifter. She's African American and incredible athlete, but some of the conversation has been about she never saw athletes that looked like her. And so I think for women to see other strong women and go, oh, okay, like I can achieve that. Like Liz Craven, who I've been training with, so she started lifting when she was like 37 after she'd had her first kid, and now she's a world record holder. That idea that, well, not only can you do it, but you could do it at any age, and you can keep getting better and stronger. And
well, it's gone over the days of it's a sort of man sport, I think, and it's important for people like you to share their story and share their experiences, so you know you can give advice and also obviously inspire other people to do that. Because Olivia, she came from like a bikini competitor thing, and she did quite well in that, but it's probably not as healthy, I think, as long term, and it's a huge expanding sport in Australia. Probably not as big here, but it was good for her, I think, to make that transition. And so, I mean, for you to share your story, but also to I guess put the idea out there for other girls to do the same thing. Have you noticed that? Have you had other people come up to you and say, you know, you've inspired me to get into this? Or
I have. I've had a few people say that, and I do every now and then. I get messages saying like, you know, you inspired me to like give it a try or find a coach, or you know, it's sometimes I'll get a message saying, we were watching you like do something and my kids watched, and my kids were like, oh, girls can be really strong. Like those things to me are like, if you can be a role model for being strong and you know, a good human and all of that stuff as well. And
that's the thing with social media and podcasts, is like you never actually know who's listening. Like there can be someone who's listening who might need that information. So obviously sharing that story is good. Just talking about I think last time you said your overall goal was to qualify for the Worlds. How are we going on that?
So, since the last time we spoke, there's been much drama in the Australian Federation.
Okay. Well, I look forward to
lots
hearing about
of politics in the sport, which has meant that right now the Australian Powerlifting Australia has been kicked out of the International Powerlifting Federation, which means that our lifters aren't eligible to compete at Worlds.
Okay.
So at the moment, it's very much a keep lifting, keep getting stronger, and wait and see how it all pans out.
Okay.
So I intend to try and compete again at the end of the year. And then next year I'll have to start making a decision about if I need to change federations or so that I can keep trying to get to that.
Yeah, but obviously the different federation, it's still drug tested if you're trying to qualify for the Worlds, because if you're doing Worlds, I'm assuming that they're...
Yeah, so there's technically an interim second federation in Australia that the IPF is recognising. But with the state of things at the moment, it's like I am hesitant to leave the recognised trusted federation to go to this new not so trusted federation. So I'm just waiting to see how it goes out. There's lots of things involved.
Yeah. With your current numbers though, would you be in the ballpark, or you?
So my current numbers should get me to nationals, and then at nationals I have to lift more.
Yeah. How much more are we talking?
Like 15, 20 kilos.
Okay. Total.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like it's within range. I've always competed with a conventional deadlift, and we're going to play with changing it to sumo now, and I think that is going to get quite a big jump relatively quickly, and then of course my squat and bench will continue to increase. So yeah, but it's not like, because you've still got another like 5-10 years of progressing. Yeah. So to me, it's being able to compete at that level has always been a long-term goal. So life stuff happens, and if I make different career choices, or I move, or I travel, to me it's never been about like it's my last chance now. I think it's one of the things that's reassuring, seeing some of the girls that are at the top in the sport right now, that they are like 7, 8, 9 years older than me. And that they're still making progress and they're still at the top of the sport, which means, I've got loads of time.
Yeah. There's no stress, there's no rush for you.
And like they will all say the same thing, that it's not about what your total is now. If you can keep training and not get hurt, you'll keep making progress. So to me, it's more important that I am enjoying myself, that I'm in a good mental state, that I'm not hurt.
Yeah.
Then I can keep training for as long as I like. Yeah.
And what sort of stuff do you do to keep yourself, I guess, in that positive frame of mindset, but also from a physical standpoint? Because obviously it's a taxing sport when you do go for those big numbers, but obviously not doing it all the time. But what is your, I guess, prehab or structured plan to keep you at that?
Yeah. Well, when I'm prepping for meet, I actually, the intensity can be quite high with, as far as like reps, and eventually, obviously, the weight can get heavier. But so through that 16 weeks in my last prep, at no point did I ever feel like it was like I was really sore or beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
I do 4 days a week of like the structured program, and then I do 2 days a week of like conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like a sled session, which is kind of active recovery stuff, but like, and then I do a session that's more high volume gymnastics, kind of pulling from the CrossFit stuff. I like that because it keeps my skills from CrossFit, but it also keeps me sane. Mm-hmm. Like being able to do something that's like off plan and like a little bit silly, that
yeah. And in terms of like soft tissue stuff, do you regularly see like a osteo or some qualified myotherapist or anything like that?
Honestly, since I have been doing a lot more of the strong fit, like openers and things to start, and concentrating on more of those principles in my training. I don't often. I don't think I had a massage the whole time I was in Australia.
Okay.
So that was, like 10 weeks I didn't have a massage or get any treatments. Yeah. And not to say that you never need them, but I think the way I'm training now, I don't feel like I have to have it. Whereas when I was training CrossFit, I had to do every week. Yeah. Or I felt like I was going to break.
Well, obviously that's a sign that you're doing things right. Mm. And I think Kelly Starrett says, you don't see a cheetah or a lion in the wild go into a stretch before they go sprint for their prey. Yeah. It's like if your body's, anthropometrics, everything's lined up and you can do it, then obviously you're...
Yeah, and well, this sort of goes into, we've had this conversation a few times recently about the idea that you have to go into the gym and then stretch for 40 minutes before you do anything. Yeah. Now, that's really counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. Like, I would rather, when I am going into the gym to warm up, I will go and do movements specific to what I'm doing, trying to bring awareness to what part of the body I'm supposed to be working. So, Strong Fit have their oblique openers. They've got YouTube videos on it. But I do different variations to get my obliques and low abs firing, because essentially you have to have that working for your to brace for your squat and your deadlift. So I do that every session, and then I do different kind of movement flows, like animal crawls and all kinds of things like that. Some of Eloy's favourite stuff. He loves the animal flow. Yeah, it's hilarious. He and I have kind of come to that from very different places, but in all the years of things that I've done, that's the thing that works. So, and it's so easy, and I spend maybe 5 minutes doing a few movement prep things, and then I get straight into training. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think if you're spending all that time doing movement prep, there's something going wrong. Yeah. And Dan John, I had on the podcast, he said the same sort of thing. He said, if you're spending more than 5 minutes on foam rolling or doing that, it's like you're not working out. Yeah. No, exactly. And I almost never foam roll. I'll maybe stretch right at the very end of a session if I've got time to sit around. And what I have been doing a lot more of recently is at the end of each session, spending time closed eyes, doing breathing exercises. And then I've been doing a lot more playing with breath through movement. Yeah. And I found that by playing with those things, it's helped me feel more fresh each session and not as fatigued. Yeah. So. Well, I mean, it's on trend with all the science and everything. It's all about breathing mechanics. Do you know how to breathe with your diaphragm? Yeah. And it has such a powerful effect on your central nervous system. Mm-hmm. A lot of
the people who are probably your more new age thinkers think it's some mystical thing that, you get from the meditation, which, you can't really argue against that. But I think there's a lot of science just even by doing things like yoga, it's learning how to breathe.
Yeah.
And the breath, if you can move into a position and open up and let a deep diaphragmatic breath out, you're having such a huge benefit to that. And it's returning you into that sort of rest, digest state. And because, obviously when you're lifting, you're in that sympathetic dominant where you're like fight or flight.
Exactly.
You're just like trying to get the bar up, and such an important thing for you as an athlete.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing that I found really interesting. And I've actually been playing with when I program for all my clients now, is that I give them, they have to do that forced quiet time and breathing at the end of every session. Because like you said, when you're lifting heavy or you're in the middle of a really hard workout, it's so sympathetic that you're constantly jacking up that stress response. And if you don't spend the time to bring yourself back to balance, then, and of course, like, you're working with loads of high stress clients. So like at some point, like, they have to break, because you can only be in that place for so long. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, modern lifestyle, which you spoke about last time, it's not just the stress that you're accumulating in the gym, it's the stress of life. It's, you sat in the car for 45 minutes when your trip should have been 15 minutes. You're stressed, your girlfriend's texting you, and, just everyone's stressed.
Yeah.
And it's accumulation. I think just having that ability to know how to center yourself with your breath is huge for performance, for obviously athletes. Who sort of instilled you? Where did you pick up that technique? Was there some sort of athlete or book?
Yeah, so there's a few people that I'm friends with who have been working with it, and they've been influenced by different people. But when I was with the Strong Fit guys in Sydney, Julian had actually spent some time last year with Casper. I can't remember his surname, but Casper is like the science guy for Wim Hof.
Yeah.
So he's like teaches their instructors and stuff, and so they spent time together last year, and essentially Casper had said, so with Wim Hof, we are controlling the nervous system response by breathing, like, to survive these like extreme sort of situations.
Yeah.
And he said, saw all of the work Julian was doing, and he's like, you're controlling the nervous system through movement. I think that these two should be working together.
Yeah.
So they spent a few weeks together completely geeking out on, the science behind it and playing with workouts and seeing these things. And Casper was the one who said, like, what if you breathed this way through the movement? And then what about so this is how you breathe to get this response. So how if we change the breathing through different movements, depending on what response we're trying to get. So that's where that the playing all started happening. And then of course you test it all and see what works for you. And then, so that's been where the main influences come from. And then, of course, once you start talking about it, then you start chatting to other people, and they're like, oh my God, and I've been doing this, and Think chatting to that person, and I read this research. And so it's been a really interesting process. I think that working on like coming back to center and like belly breathing and all of those things is a really great way to end a session, and like anyone can implement it. But we've also been playing with like how to breathe through movements depending on what you're trying to achieve in the movement, which has also been amazing. So
and are you talking about in particular your actual lifts or not? Oh, you are? Okay.
So it can be during, like, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're doing you just got to do like a minute of squats, then the way you breathe through the movement will be different versus trying to do a 1 rep max.
Yeah. And do you, this is a little bit of diversion from that, but in terms of when you're going for your lifts, are you doing a full Valsalva where you hold your breath for the whole lift?
No,
oh, you're not?
I'm not now. I used to do that. And at the end of every lift, I felt like I was going to die. Like, it was like, and this was with the whole, like full sympathetic, like at the end, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then you have to go and lie on the floor because you've got nothing left. And it was horrific. But that's always what, like, you were told to do, right? To stay tight enough and all of that. Yeah. So what I have been doing now, and someone, like for a squat, the perfect example, if you have a look at Isabella von Weissenberg, she's got the world record for the squat in the 72 class. Incredible.
What is it?
Like over 200 kilos. She's absolutely incredible lifter. But essentially what you'll do is you'll breathe in and then just as you're coming out of the hole, you start to breathe out. Yeah. And then you like essentially scream. So think of like the noise someone makes when they're like fighting. They throw a punch and it's like a like or like a sort of a grunt or whatever noise. So the noise then starts to come rather than through the lips. It's coming through like the back of your throat and your nose. Mm-hmm. And so that is, you're going to breathe all the way through the movement on the way up. Yeah. And it's crazy because I would do like a 1 rep max and be like a few minutes later going, oh, that felt fine. Yeah. Whereas when I did it accidentally, I wasn't thinking, and I held my breath like in training. So I breathed through a rep and then I held my breath on the next one and I literally was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Yeah. And it was just, it was more proving to me that there's something to it. But I've been doing the same thing when I deadlift. Mm-hmm. So literally breathing in and then before pushing through the floor, starting to exhale through the lips. Yeah. So it's like pursed lips. You're not. Yeah. And then it'll change the breath changes through the movement. But I had tested my sumo deadlift before I left Dubai, and I got stuck at 100 I managed to get 165 off the floor, but it was like full on grindy, like death by deadlift. So the week I was in Sydney with Julian, he goes, okay, so play with this breathing, just work up to a heavy single. And I just kept putting weight on and I kept breathing through the lift. And then I stood up and I was like, oh, that was 175. And it felt like effortless. It's like 10 kilo PR without even like thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So when the guys were in Canberra, Julian and Liz did a session together. And so Liz had failed 180 kilo deadlift in training the day before. Fresh, couldn't get it off the floor. The next day with the breathing did 185.
That's awesome.
And that was after a full training session and being, so it's insane. Yeah. But of course it's like anything, you've got to play with it and learn what works. And
because I mean, what works for her might not necessarily work. So you need to experience it yourself. And it's the thing that and one of the reasons why I really liked working with Julian is because he wants you to understand why you're doing something. So then you can make the right decisions for yourself rather than this is how you always do it. And it's very much the way I coach as well. I want you to understand how something's supposed to feel, because not everyone's going to look the same way when they do a movement. Yeah. But do you understand where you're supposed to be and how it's supposed to feel? And and I think that's powerful that you said that. It's a lot of coaches miss that. They spend a lot of time learning the science, reading the latest research, and then when they talk to their clients, they're giving them such intrinsic cues that they're not going to be able to associate the feeling. It's engage your lower traps, squeeze your glute med, and it's well, that's true. You might need to use those muscles, but if they don't know how it feels to do that, and that's what you just said is like, how does it feel?
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing.
That's the thing. You say to me, engage like your glute med. I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Like, how is that so? And then all I'm going to be thinking about is like, where does he want me to be? So I'm going to be like moving around trying to get like the right response from you, because like I really have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Whereas if I can give you something to feel, and then you'll feel it for the first time, I go, okay, I want you to feel that again.
Yeah.
Then someone go, okay, and they're like,
yeah. They don't necessarily need to know. Are you innovating that, glute med or whatever it is?
And
it's just
over time, like, if I've got a client that I've been working for a while, once they start to feel it, then I can explain what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, it's a sign of good coaching, I think. There was something I wanted to ask you about the competition, and it was the theatre of the whole before the lift. That it's sort of like, it was so entertaining because I've been and watched, heaps of sport all my life, but just I loved the theatre of some of the lifters coming out, and the guys especially. There was one girl in particular who was really sort of engaging, but some of the guys were hilarious. Like, it'd come out, like stomp around, slap their face, have chalk go everywhere, scream at the top of their lungs.
Some people put on a good show,
and I'm like, this is like hilarious. Like, I was loving it. So I just want to. What's some sort of crazy stuff you've seen?
Oh, some people have these routines that they do literally every time they lift, and like everyone needs to have those things, but some of them, like you saw, are incredibly dramatic. But it's all about getting yourself into the right mental space. So if that's what they've got to do to psych themselves up and ignore like whatever's going on around them, there's a few guys here that do like lots of drama, and then there's one or two that I in my last meet that was just hilarious to watch.
Yeah,
like
there was a guy who he got told off, but he failed his lift, and then he went and kicked the bar.
Oh no! So
I was like, that's bad etiquette.
Yeah. So within the IPF, there's rules for like etiquette. Like you're not allowed to like say like swear. You're not allowed to be rude to the judges. Like, so things like that you'll get in trouble for. But there's a girl, I think she's Australian, that was at Worlds a few years ago, and she was known as the Deadlift dancer. And she has this whole like elaborate like full body like routine that every time she deadlifts, and it's like, to me it's like insane. But if that's the routine that you have to go through to get into your plus like from a spectator perspective, that's so much fun to watch. It's so much more interesting. Like I have to like get very like internal to deal with the stress of the competition. So it's not until I know that I've survived at the end that I'm like, oh, okay, like I made it. Now I can acknowledge even that the crowd's there. Like I have to try and
because that was my next question. I wanted to know what's your routine like for you. Like you obviously just said you're very centered. You're probably not someone who's screaming a lot, but do you have like little idiosyncrasies that you have to, brush your left knee and... Hi guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Just a reminder to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now back to the interview.
Nothing so much like those kind of things, but I have every time I squat, bench and deadlift, my setup, I try to make exactly the same. So you go through the same routine with like putting your belt on and like all your equipment and whatever. And then like when I'm stepping up to the bar with to squat, for example, I go through the same routine of how to get my back tight and then getting into position, and then it's the same breathing and the same like 3 steps, and all of that I try to make the same from the time I do an empty bar when I start to the time that I do my my max lifts, and I try to do that, like replicate it through training. And so then like you've got that routine and it's always the same, so that once you come to comp day, you just try to do the same thing you've always done. And then I always like to think, I used to say it when I was doing CrossFit, it's like you've done all the hard work already. So like by the time you come to comp, you've done all the hours of training, you've done this constantly repeating the same perfect movement, and then hopefully you just do the same thing slightly heavier. Yeah, exactly. And do you let out a big scream at the top of your... I'm working on doing that now more. So now that I've been playing with the breathing, I'm getting louder. Well, that's good to know, because it makes it much more entertaining for spectators. You have to check out Isabella's videos. She's like, it's like,
I will.
So fun.
I'll look
to
her
watch
up.
Her,
What's her last name?
Isabella von Weissenberg.
Okay. I'm not sure I know how to spell that. But
that's all right. I can send you the video. A link. She's amazing.
Can you just talk us through as well now you're experienced, you've been around and you've been in the sport and you're quite successful at it, but can you just talk about that first competition that you did, what you were thinking before the lifts? Because I think it's good advice, to people who are starting, that to know what to expect.
So the first thing is, like, if you've never done a competition before, there's nothing that will prepare you for that feeling of being on the platform, having everyone watch you. It's like, it is a stressful experience. So the more you can do to like make that easier for yourself is really important. As far as Patrick, who is now coaching Olivia, which is awesome, had coached me through my first few meets, and he's an excellent coach. But one of the things that he would say was that your first lift has to be a lift that you could make, like, no matter how bad everything went. Like, it has to be like you could do it with your eyes closed. It should feel like it's super conservative. Like, even on your very worst day when you're weak, and like, even if the lift, like, you're completely off balance, you could still make that number, because that gives you the win. Like, once you've done one, then you have the confidence on the next lift, and then you can start pushing, like, challenging yourself a bit more. But if you make that first lift slightly heavier, and then it feels, because of the nerves, you're going to walk it out and suddenly it feels like 20 kilos heavier than is actually on the bar, and then you go to squat it and it feels even heavier again. That is quite terrifying. So you want to know, like, you're going to get that win right off the bat. And definitely having someone around as your support on the day, the first time you compete, who's done it before, to act as your coach, so that when you start to get stressed, they can make decisions for you. Because you'll always have a plan going into comp, like what sort of numbers you want to hit. But if something doesn't go to plan, having someone there to sort of help you through the decision-making process or make decisions for you is really helpful. And then I would say making sure you've got your nutrition, so that, because it turns into a really long day. And I remember my first comp being absolutely exhausted. Like, by the end of the day, I had absolutely nothing left. I was so much adrenaline, and then, like, I'd just been eating, like, candy all day, and by the end I was like, there was just absolutely nothing left.
Sugar low.
So I actually now focus on keeping like proteins and fats more early in the day, with like a little bit of, like, I'll have oats or something. Like, what did I do? I think I did overnight oats with, like, really high protein yogurt. And
it's obviously stuff that you've had before that agrees with you.
Of course. And then I did, it was like, I can't remember what I ate through the day, but it wasn't until I had like, just before the deadlifts that I had stuff that was more like sugary, stuff. Because I had that after having the crash the first time around, like that's probably the biggest change I've made in over the years.
The other question was, I guess just watching some of the other guys we're taking like pre-workouts, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, especially if it was like your first competition, your adrenals would be so like ramped up. Would you even consider taking a pre-workout or not?
It depends what you do in training. Firstly, like I don't take anything like that, so I would never do it on a comp day. But that was the other, like I had a load of coffee the first comp I did as well as all the sugar, and it like ruined me. But if I maybe would save that until later in the day when you want to have energy before you deadlift. Because normally you have a good amount of time to like warm up and whatever else. So you could take it then. Like, cause if you're going to be there for 4 or 5 hours and you've got to maintain energy through that whole time.
That's not a good idea.
Like, people do it, but it wouldn't be my first choice.
Yeah. It was just funny. I was just watching some of the guys and they'd look like they'd had enough pre-workout to kill like an elephant. Just walking around. I'm like, man, this guy is either going to burst into flames or he's going to lift the bar through the roof.
Yeah. And it's funny because like they will be absolutely ruined for like a week after that comp. Yeah. Because of like just obviously the stress from the lifts but then like all the other stuff. So it's interesting because that was one thing I found this last meet. It was the best meet I've ever had, but it was also, so my nutrition was good this time. It was the first meet I've gone 9 for 9 and made all my lifts.
Okay.
But
so even when you started, you didn't get all 9 lifts? No. Okay.
Like the first one, I had a technical fault with the my last bench, and then I think I failed my last deadlift in my first meet. To get all the lifts is relatively uncommon in a meet. So like that's like the dream is to make all your lifts. I was super conservative with my choice of my deadlift weights. Like I can pull 170 without like it's not that it's taxing, it's heavy, but it's not my true max. But I wanted the total, so I was conservative on that because if I went heavier and then didn't make it on the day, then what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I've just lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Was the?
That's okay. I'll jump in anyway. I wanna ask you as well because I saw a lot of the lifters using it, and I've never used it myself, and I just wonder the smelling salts. What are they like, and do they do anything, or is it just like a placebo?
I've actually never used them either.
Oh, really?
And it's one of those things that I've been in a few gyms like on meet day, and they're like, "Do you want to try it?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to try it on the day I'm competing." So yeah, I'll have to work it out. I'll have to try it at some point.
It just looks funny, like the way they do it.
Yeah. I think it just like it gets them really like jacked up just before they go out. But like most of the lifters that I know well don't use them. So
yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, it's obviously working for you. Don't necessarily need them. Yeah. But I just thought I'd ask you because it sort of interests me, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So what's some advice for, I guess, just more of a training template? We didn't talk too much about training templates last time. More so just for beginners and someone who's trying to get into it. What's the commitment for I guess you need to differentiate between the two sexes as well. I think last time we spoke about how women can handle slightly more volume on some of their lifts than men. But what would you, just like a basic template, and how many training days would someone need to commit to?
It's
hard, yeah.
And it's very, like, if you're writing programming for, like, each person can be very different. That said, you can have a general training program, and if someone's never lifted, they'll make progress because they're getting better at lifting. But a lot of the factors that I look at, like if I'm for myself or if I'm training someone, is like, what time do they actually have to commit to training? And then it will matter, like some people can deadlift twice a week and be fine. Some guys will deadlift once and they need an entire week to recover. So then the frequency of the lifts will depend a little on personal factors.
Personal recovery, yeah.
Yeah, personal recovery, or sometimes it might be, we were talking last week about, like, it might be that an athlete gets to be in the back squat position. It's tough for their mobility, so they have to, and they can only comfortably do that without their like biceps or shoulders like blowing up once a week. And then you have to change to other variations to make it so that they can get the volume of work in.
But just we'll assume that mobility recovery is okay. What would...
So, in my opinion, the like squat and bench are squat tends to be the thing that most requires like the balance and timing. So the more often you can repeat the squat and to like perfect the movement, I think is better. And then obviously you can handle a little more frequency on the bench. Just it doesn't fatigue as much, and then you would do less frequency on the deadlift, obviously. So I have done
reps and sets for like someone who's just coming in.
So when you start out, you would do maybe a little less sets, but like higher reps. But you would start, like, if you're looking at, to me, I've really enjoyed working with the RPE scale recently, and it can be hard with a new athlete who can't perceive how hard they're working.
Yeah, just RPE, for those who don't know, is rate of perceived exertion. Yeah. So it's based on perception.
Yeah. So essentially on the RPE scale, a 10 is like, it was the hardest. There's no chance you could do another lift, like that was an all-out effort. A 9 would be you could do one more rep, or you think you could. An 8 would be you could do 2 more reps. So when you start out, like your 5 or your 6 are more like your warm-up weights. A 7's a little harder, but not the same intensity, obviously, as your like 8, 9, 10. When someone's starting, for a good amount of time, I'd keep them in the 5, 6, 7 range, and keep the volume a little higher, but the so we can just really dial in the technique. And then you can also get, like, if someone's in that range and you're doing 6 reps, like sets of 6 reps, they're going to get in more volume of work than if they're doing lower rep scheme, heavier weight, because that's just going to fatigue them faster. Yeah. So depending on the person, I think the guys tend to, like we've talked about, like struggle with a lot of volume. Yeah. So like if you're doing the bigger numbers in the set than they would do, or of reps, then they would do less sets. Like if you had guys doing sets of 10, they're going to die pretty quickly. But but like for me, doing 5 sets of 10, it's like, it's like,
That's where you live. You enjoy it.
yeah, it's still like, oh God, I've got 10s today, but I can handle that volume and I feel really comfortable. Like, I know other girls that literally, like, the volume that they do is absolutely insane in comparison even to what I'm lifting. But then I know other people who, like, do, like, half the volume I'm doing and are like, oh.
Yeah.
So, like, there's got to be an in-between level. Like, I think when you're starting, it's about how much work can you do through the week without it completely ruining you so you can't train another session. Like, you need to get enough work in that you're getting an adaptation, but not so much work that you're hurt or you're...
Yeah.
So, like, if you can keep the intensity a little lower and just keep ramping up the volume over time.
And then frequency would be like maybe 4 or 5 sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always done 4 sessions so that I had flexibility for 2 sessions to do other stuff. Some people like to do 5 and then spread the work through the week a little bit more. It just depends on what is your lifestyle and how much time you want to commit in the gym.
Yeah.
I know people who do 6 sessions a week and but, like, to me, like, do you want to have a life? Like, is all you want to do powerlifting every day?
Yeah. If you don't have a full-time job or if you're, got all the time in the world, go to the gym.
Like, for some people, that's their social life and everything else. Like, not that my life isn't in the gym, I'm there all the time, but I also like to be able to go into the gym and be like, I'm going to play today.
Yeah.
And if I had 6 days where I had to follow the program, I would feel restricted. And I think it's important to have those options to play and have choice.
Yeah. It's interesting you said play. A lot of the guys that I've interviewed, they talk about making sure there's an element of fun in the training, even at a high level. Like, I was speaking to Jason Stacey. He's a strength and conditioning coach, and he's coached a lot of the top tennis players in the world. And he talks about fun and enjoyment. It needs to be enjoyment, and you don't want it to be just like a job for you, because then you're not going to sustain it for a longer period of time.
Well, this has been a conversation I had with a few of my friends who are, like, very high level powerlifters, and there turns to a point when they've been doing it a long time and they're the best at it, that when you start lifting, you don't do it because of what everyone else is doing. You start because you enjoy it and you're getting stronger, and maybe your friends are lifting. Once you get to the best, being at point of being the best in the sport, it starts becoming, oh, my sponsors, oh, my coach, oh, what everyone expects of me, my social media followers, whatever. It becomes being about everybody else, and it stops being about your enjoyment.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's really important that there has to be that element of play, and there has to be an, like, understanding of why you're doing it still. Because, like, powerlifting, you're never going to make a lot of money. Like, they're not making millions being a powerlifter.
It's not. You're not going to get the same as a top golfer or a tennis player.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unfortunate. Like, I would love to think that one day I could make money doing just lifting, but it's like.
But you never know. You could be paving the way in the next 20 years' time. There could be big money.
We can really hope. I need to find someone who really wants to sponsor, like, this sport, but. With that being the case, there has to be, like, the amount of time that we put into training and the sacrifice and all of those things, there has to be fun in it. Because that at some point, and I've noticed it with a few people I'm close with, that it then turns into these negative spirals and it can turn into depression and other things. And, like, we never got into it because of what other people are doing. So, so to me, keeping fun and being aware of self-talk and, like, what is my purpose with each session, like, all of those things are really important. And then just, like, making time to try new things and get outside and maybe, try like meet people that I haven't met before and things like that keep me out of this. Yeah. Because it's so easy, like you're like, I'm 8 weeks out from comp and I can't go out. I've got to be on this diet. I've got to cut. I have to follow the program, and I can't possibly socialize. I can't try something new. Like before I left Dubai, I went skiing for the first time, and the whole time I was skiing, I was like, can you imagine if I pop my knee now, like just while I'm prepping for comp? Like, and that's the thing, as a lifter, you start going, I can't do that sport because I might hurt myself. And it's like, well, where's the fun in it? If all your whole life you're worried that you might hurt yourself, so you can't lift anymore.
And that can come to your detriment as well, because if you're got that sort of narrow scope focus and you sort of beat yourself down and you're like, I can't do this, I can't do that, then it's going to affect your recovery as well, just from a mindset point of view.
Yeah, that's really important.
So I had a couple of questions from Instagram. I put up yesterday Instagram story, and a couple of people put through some questions.
Okay.
The first one was from Rachel, and it was, what supplements do you use or recommend for powerlifters, if any?
So I am a really bad person as far as like supplementation. I don't really take anything.
It's always a question when you put questions out. Everyone's like, what supplements do you take? And it's like, you're missing the picture. It's not all about supplements. But
so like, I'm sure like I could dial it in and take some things, but I always found when I was playing with that stuff, I was super inconsistent, and then it was like I didn't really feel like when I was taking anything versus not taking anything, there was any difference. To me, it's more important that I am getting enough protein, that I'm eating enough food, that I'm sleeping well. I just think like you can take all the supplements in the world, but if you're not sleeping well or eating enough protein or enough food, then you're ruined. So and of course I think quality of food is important, and making sure you get enough vegetables and all the of basics, that good stuff. And I think if you've got the basics down, then you can start playing with the supplementation and stuff. But like I've used BCAAs like while in the middle of training sessions. Just because I like the flavor and it's like different than drinking water. But again, if I don't use it, I haven't really noticed that much of a difference. Well, I mean,
a lot of times with that sort of stuff, it's placebo. If you feel good, it makes a difference. Then if it actually does, who knows? But if it's making a difference to your mindset, then keep taking them.
Exactly. It's like I haven't even had protein powder in like all the time I've been away. I've been like eating food and sleeping and
well, that's key for recovery. Now we've got next question. I got 3 questions. So the next one is from Sean, and Sean, he sent this through on an email. I'm a big guy. I'm 120 kilos, carrying a bit of fat, but wanted to compete in my first powerlifting comp. And he's saying, should I focus on dropping weight or just developing my strength in the first comp?
Definitely don't drop weight.
No?
For your first comp or several comps, it's more important that you dial in your technique and just keep working on getting strong. There is enough stress around competing without adding stress with diet. So what I would recommend is train just to be as strong as you are right now. And there's no pressure on like what your performance is the first comp. It's literally just about getting the experience. If you do great, that's amazing. But there's so much to learn from the experience of competing, and the added stress of dieting is not worth it.
No.
So I would say once you have a few comps under your belt, then slowly cut weight until you're at the point that you want to be at. But actually having to do a short weight cut, I really wouldn't recommend for anyone. Like the stress on the body and the mental stress to go through that it's
too much.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. Like, I can understand, like, obviously if you have qualified for Worlds and you've got to compete in that weight class, and you're already naturally quite lean and you have to do a water cut and whatever else. Like, there are those situations where you have to do that. But I'm of the opinion that if you can, over time, in a safe and with a long-term strategy, get yourself to the weight that you'd like to compete at, like within a few kilos, then if you need to cut 2 or 3 kilos within a few weeks, then that's super easy. But that's kind of just dial in your diet a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think too many people go, oh, it's all right, like I've got to cut like 9 kilos and I'll just do this crazy water cut and I'll starve myself for a few weeks. You just lose so much strength.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm very much of the opinion as a coach and as an athlete that things need to be in a as much holistic and long-term approach. Some people will say, you know, no coaches that I've ever worked with would encourage you to cut weight for your first meet, but some people are like, oh, I'm just going to compete this year and thrash myself and get the very, very best total I can. I'm of the opinion that any training strategy should be with a long-term approach and about long-term consistent life changes.
Yeah.
So
some good advice. Yeah. Okay, so the last question from Instagram was from Jeff. First sentence was practicing with bumper plates, ? He said, is it okay to use bumper plates leading up to my first comp? I don't have access in the gym that I'm training to powerlifting plates.
Yeah. For years I trained with bumper plates coming from CrossFit. When you're starting out, it's like, just get your work on technique. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. When you I would definitely try to get a few sessions in, maybe, if you want to visit a gym that has comp equipment. The main reason is that the bumper plates are not calibrated plates, so they can say that they're 20 kilos, but they can be off on weight, and they can be less weight than you think you're lifting. So just for getting your numbers and having an idea of exactly what you're going to lift on your comp days makes a difference. Obviously, once you're starting to get more competitive and having access to comp equipment is helpful, just because it will feel different. And if you can train on what you're competing on, then that will obviously make it easier. But people can worry too much about having all the right gear when you've just got to start.
Yeah.
Like, I'd been lifting a really long time before I lifted with calibrated plates.
Yeah. I didn't even know that. So what? Even with like bumper plates, they can be off.
Yeah.
Like.
So you'll see like the so the Elico bumper plates that are used at competition, like those are calibrated. But your bumper plates that they have, like the big rubber ones they have in a CrossFit gyms and things, they can be off. And it can be by a few kilos. So then if you've got quite a number of them and they're all off,
it substantially adds up.
Yeah. So like when I lift using those, like sometimes I've got to lift in a CrossFit gym, or like if I'm traveling, or but I will try, once I get very close to meet, to make sure that I'm lifting on with calibrated plates, just so that I know that I'm lifting what I think I'm lifting. That's kind of the main reason, really.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Yeah, because this is the place that I work at. They've got a mix of pounds and kilo plates, and it's like,
be so confusing.
It's so confusing, and I'm always like got my calculator out trying to work out exactly what it is, and it's those like the 25 kilo plates are like everyone uses them as 10 kilo plates, but they're like really closer to 11.
Yeah.
And so if you've got multiple of those on there, you're like, geez, I'm really weak today. It's like...
Yeah, well, that's exactly, you've added a few kilos and you're like... Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be my advice.
Yeah, and obviously it's a slightly different feeling, just to sort of follow up from that, is depending what bars you use.
Yeah. So, like different bars, like Olympic lifting bars versus, and like specialist deadlift bars and things, they have a bit more bend in them, versus like your specialist, like your powerlifting bar has less give. So that can actually make quite a difference for your ability to make the lift.
So it's if you have less give in the bar, it's easier to pull or to lift.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because you'll see like with the strongmen, and they have the sort of longer bendier bar. It actually like they get the movement before the actual weight starts to move. They get and I'm not 100% sure on what that is. I think it's got to do with like them being able to get into better leverages and stuff, but I would have to ask around for that information.
That's okay.
All I know is that it is different. So people will lift with a bar and it's like, oh, I'm great. And then you turn up at comp and the bar is different, and then suddenly the weight won't move.
Yeah.
So having an idea of what will be at comp and being able to train on those is definitely helpful.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're doing touch and go reps with bumper plates, you get that feedback, bit of bounce on the floor.
So I don't let anyone I coach touch and go on deadlifts.
No.
Always dead stop and then start again.
Yeah. Because it's specific to the comp.
Yeah. And so like obviously if I'm coaching a CrossFit class and it's got like 20 reps of deadlifts, then the purpose is different. But if I'm trying to build strength, then why are you bouncing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for Instagram, then maybe you can do it.
Yeah. So that's
okay.
Good questions. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So that's the last of the questions. So I got these are rapid fire questions. Now, obviously, you being on the podcast before, I've already asked you the original questions, so I've slightly changed them around a little bit. So the first one is books or books you're currently reading, or anything in the last 3 or 4 months since we last spoke.
The most recent book I've read, actually there's 2 really good ones. The most recent book I've finished was called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And that is essentially about mindfulness and meditation, and being able to approach life from a place of radical acceptance. So that is awesome. And the other one that is more training related is Dr. Stuart McGill's Gift of Injury.
Okay.
Which is a lot of people who have studied like physical therapy and like whatever at university will be familiar with Dr. McGill's research. He's renowned as one of the best back specialists in the world. But Gift of Injury, he wrote, co-authored with Brian Carroll, who was one of the best powerlifters in the world. Essentially, Brian had a very, very bad back injury, had completely fractured one of his discs, was told he would need surgery and that he would never lift again. And the book is about them meeting and the rehabilitation for him to not have surgery and get back to lifting world records.
Yeah.
Really, really awesome book.
Yeah. So it's less on the technical side of things, more on just the...
No, so he's got a few other books that are more technical.
Because I've got a couple of his other ones, but they're very specific, very scientific, very...
Yeah.
Heavy reading, not the sort of books you'd just go chapter by chapter.
So this is kind of nice because it's got some writing from him and then some writing from Brian. So it sort of talks about Brian's experience and what he was going through in his mental state that led him to where he was, and then what he felt going through the rehab process, and then Dr. McGill comes with the, like, from the doctor's perspective, like how he had to frame things to get the response that he needed from Brian and all of that sort of stuff. So he goes into like the technicality of like how he rehabbed, but it's also kind of an interesting story as well, rather than some of his other books that are much more technical. So
yeah, cool.
It's one that, like, you know, if anyone could read it. So anyone who's a strength athlete or a coach would find it interesting.
Yeah,
so.
Cool. All right. So next one, any movie recommendations or documentaries?
Movie recommendations. I'm terrible because I
can't remember your answer last time. So
I think last time I had just watched Icarus, that like drug testing thing. I don't watch a lot of films or television.
That's okay. You don't.
I'm trying to think of
what did you watch on the plane on the way over?
I can't even remember. I think I worked and then slept most of the way. That's terrible. I'm really looking forward to watching. I haven't seen it yet. The most recent CrossFit Games documentary is out as well.
Okay.
So each year they sort of do a behind the scenes of the CrossFit Games and follow the top athletes.
Yeah.
So that's out at the moment, and that's one thing on my list of things to watch.
Have you seen Born Strong? It's on like these strong world's strongest men competitors. Oh yeah. It's hilarious. Like really interesting documentary. It's on Netflix, so it's an easy one to find.
Check it out,
it's got Brian Shaw and I always forget the other guy's name. But yeah, really interesting documentary. Just even people who aren't into that, it's just hilarious just to see and what these guys eat on a daily basis to maintain. They've got this one of the guys is like 5'9", and he weighs 400 and something pounds, which is like, I think it's around 180 kilos. And he's just like, he's got almost reverse anorexia. He's like, if he sees his body weight go under 400 pounds, he's like, I need to eat more. And he's just like, but these guys are insane. One of the guys, I forget his name, is from the UK, and he was the first guy in the world to deadlift over 1,100 pounds.
That's insane.
It was like, it was 500 kilos that he pulled from the floor, and it's in the documentary, but you definitely have to check that one out.
Definitely.
And also, I'm interested because you've been back to Australia. What foods have you been eating or changed since back in Australia?
So I was super excited when I got back to Australia because when I was in Sweden powerlifting a few years ago now, they do this high protein yogurt, which is like really thick. And I went absolutely crazy for it there. And then we didn't have it in Dubai forever. And then a company started doing it, but it was expensive here. And then I went back to Australia, and there's like 5 different companies doing Swedish style high protein yogurt. So I have been eating a lot of that. I have actually been enjoying Vegemite toast, which I never ate when I was here, but it was kind of nice to be in Australia and have that. And then I've actually recently, just because some friends had mentioned it to me, I always ate chicken breast before, and they were like, why don't you have chicken thighs? Because they're much nicer and, cheaper. But
they've also got flavour as well.
So I started getting chicken thighs, and it's why didn't I think of that before? It's such a, that's been a life-changing diet experience. So most of my diet hasn't changed that much. I'm obsessed with candy, so I'm having to control myself, but
yeah, that's fair enough. Since last time, any mistakes since we last spoke? Any blunders? Anything you've done and you're like, oh man?
Oh, there are a few. So obviously we had our friends visiting. I had all the crew out from the US, the StrongFit guys, but then some of our other friends that have been doing the StrongFit stuff for a while came out from California. So we had like a really nice group all visiting Canberra. And so I was like, yeah, I'm on holidays too. Of course, I was 3 weeks out from meet and we went down the coast and I should say peer pressured, but it was completely my own fault. And I ended up like giving myself alcohol poisoning.
Oh, wow.
Like I was like completely out of action for like 48 hours. And
What were you drinking?
like I had a lot of red wine and then it just got out of control when I started drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
You know, it was a great idea at the time, and the next day I was like, I literally like couldn't keep water down for like
Oh no.
15 hours or something. It was terrible. But it was hilarious because I had told my coach that I was like, I had friends and we were going down the coast, and I received an email the next day when I was like dying that said, have a great time, have a drink or two, but not too many. And I'm like, well, you could have told me that earlier. Of course, I'm an adult. I should know better, but, you know, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But when it happened, I was like, seriously, Jesse, like 3
And
weeks out from me.
How did you go? The meet was fine in the end, or?
Yeah, it was insane because I also like ate cake nearly every day. And was like sort of like eating food and all of that, but I weighed in the lightest I've ever competed, and the comp was amazing. So I'm like, I don't know, like
that could be a recipe. Maybe you have to get drunk on red wine and whiskey next
I think
meet.
it's probably more the fact that I was like having not been working for a few months and just I've had loads more sleep, so my stress levels have been less. So I think all of that, my nutrition hasn't really changed, but I think that's been the biggest factor.
Well, I've heard people talk about it before. The quickest way to fat loss is often sleep.
Yeah.
So if you sleep more, it can improve your body composition just by changing only that.
Yeah.
Last question is business plans for the next 12 months. We spoke about it before we hit record. Just sort of interested to hear. And at this point, you can plug what you're doing here in Dubai as well and future plans.
So it's I went to Australia with all I knew is that I wanted to spend a few months like with really incredible athletes and coaches and taking some downtime, and then I didn't really have a plan moving forward. I was like, I wanted to give myself space to make a plan and, you know, to be creative about it and not have the pressure of like, what am I doing tomorrow? So it's been great. I am even more motivated to continue coaching and focusing on women in strength sports and just empowering women to be the strongest, best versions of themselves. I am working on some stuff to develop a business, but where that will be is kind of up in the air at the moment. It's been amazing being home, but one of the things that has kind of stood out to me is really how amazing the opportunities I've had being here in the Middle East have been. The exposure, the network that I have, the opportunities to have incredible like people that travel through that and so I'm
could be back. Maybe.
Yeah. So I'm not promising anything, but I'm definitely assessing all my options. I'm running a lifting seminar tonight for a ladies' gym here in Dubai, and we'll be focusing on squat and deadlift technique. I'm here for another week or so, just doing a few like privates and stuff like that, and catching up with friends and.
Yeah.
And then we will hopefully have a plan moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to have you back, and it's been awesome having a chat, and I'm glad we could set aside some time and chat again. So I obviously taking the opportunity because you're in Dubai.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me again.